Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, we could probably just move on to John.
You guys ready for my favorite? I
Oh, here
literally
we are. You're just waiting
busted
for it.
out the first 5 verses of John in my conversation I referenced. Um, Probably would have been last episode, but that I was.
You're muted.
Dang it! That happens all the time. Yeah, I'm super excited to get into John. As I was saying before, you so kindly pointed out that I was muted. I definitely didn't just have flashbacks of when we recorded 30 minutes of a chosen episode without it actually being recording. I'm definitely not having.
Isn't there supposed to be a red light? No.
Yeah, definitely not being triggered right now.
You,
But yeah, I just wrote out the first 5 verses of John here. In the conversation that I talked about, I think it was in our last episode with my 2 friends. If it wasn't last episode,
yeah, it was.
whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think it's great among a few things. But first off, as it applied to that conversation, shout out my buddies who I was talking to. I was trying to kind of convey the importance of scripture and how like it, I mean, well, I'll just read it and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But like, I love how this starts. Did you have something to say before I started reading? Because I did kind of cut you off a little bit.
No. I mean, I guess I was just looking at my notes and realizing like I have a lot more notes on John than any of the other things, probably because I'm like going in circles trying to understand the art. And
all right, so I'll get into it here. So this is the prologue of John. It's a long one, but sit back, maybe take a sip of that tea or coffee.
Are you about to read the whole thing?
I was gonna do the whole book. I mean,
No,
yeah, I
John
can
1.
no.
Change your
no. How do you want to break it up? Because it is 1 through 18 that we have on our spreadsheet here. I can go through all 18 at once, or we can break it up in chunks.
Start by 1 through 5.
Okay, perfect. All right, so here, first 5 lines. In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. And yeah, so that's the first 5 lines there, and kind of what I was talking about in my conversation with my friends today. And about the importance of scripture and like what we were talking about is, my friend who maybe he's a Christian, maybe he's not, I don't know. But he was talking about like, isn't just the belief in God enough, right? You don't, you can have that in isolation with nothing else, no church, no community, no Bible, and just have that, God exists, and therefore you can communicate with him, right? So that should be good enough. And I was trying to explain the importance of like God can communicate and talk to us and teach us through a multitude of avenues, right? I mean, he can speak to you through other people. He can speak to you in dreams, and he can speak to you through songs, through, I don't know, God. I mean, it's God. He can impart whatever he needs to impart to you in numerous ways. But outside of prayer, like this book is like the hotline, right? This is the main line. Like prayer and scripture is your main line to God, right? For him to speak. And the reason I gave him this is because in the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, they're using the Word as like as Jesus, like insert in the beginning, Jesus already existed. Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. Jesus gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it.
Mhm.
But I love the use of the word because Jesus is also this. Like, this is God. The word, this is the word of God. Like, God is Jesus, is the Holy Spirit, is also the word, right?
Mhm.
And I love how John opens up with this. It's so I don't know. I love it. I love it so
Well,
much.
it's interesting too because if you look at like the genealogies in the other gospels, right? Um, that are brought out, like John is actually, I mean, it's basically a genealogy in the beginning. They're like
True.
in a sense, it's not like going through, but it's like, hey, you know how they talked about starting with Abraham, and then the other one talks about
Yeah.
like no, like this is way before that, like in the beginning. Like it can't get
Mhm.
any more before that. You know what I mean? Like it can't. It's like the first words of everything in the beginning. Um, and they describe the word kind of what you were just describing it as Jesus. In the Greek, it's the logos, right? And that's
Mhm.
like it's it's like a word that embodies this like a conception or an idea. In Greek, they would recognize it as the principal reason that govern the world, right? The logos. A lot of the Greek philosophers. Hebrew is another expression for God. So, which is where if you have John speaking to both Greek and Hebrew originating people here, you have this idea of like, here's God, here's reason, um, your philosophy, your logos here. These two are equal. Oh, and this beginning, like it actually started with him, and he was
Yeah.
there, and then he takes like in how my version is I think the CSB is a little bit more elegant than the NLT. It reads, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. Right.
Mhm.
That's, I feel like, the version I always heard. Um, Rather than, I think yours is more like literal. I feel like the NLT is more like, right, it, rather than like, this seems more poetic. But and then in verse 2 he starts out, I don't know what yours says, but it says he was with God. Like that's like, that is the first connection between, here's the logos, um here's with God. Well, here he was with God in the beginning.
Mhm.
It's like that connection between the word and Jesus, right? Is that what
Yeah.
you're, yeah. What does yours start out with too? I can't remember what NLT is.
He existed in the beginning with God.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, he was with God. He existed in the beginning with God.
Mhm.
Um, and then all things were created through him. And so, and apart from him, not one thing was created that has been created. I
Mhm.
like that because, in physics, a lot of, the questions are, can something start from nothing? Right. A lot of the physicists that study like cosmology and the start of the universe, they go back to this, and then they start applying this almost like this, I don't know, I like to think dead end philosophy to physical properties of like, the singularity and the Big Bang, right?
Right.
And it's like mixing. You can't, I don't know how you can mix those two, but it's like, I feel like the physical does not give evidence to like this logical spiritual aspect of it, you know what I mean? And I feel like the two are mixed all the time, but created some, I mean, this is essentially saying that God created something from nothing, right? I mean, that's, yeah. So, and then in him was life, life was the light of the man, light shines in the darkness, yet the darkness did not overcome it, meaning that like, um that the darkness does not overcome God's light. And so yeah, no, that's what do you do? I feel like, is this like the pinnacle of John for you? Do you love this beginning? Because like I do too. I really do. I really do
It
like the
it
beginning of it.
really gets off to a strong start. That's for sure. And I loved seeing this in The Chosen
Did
when
it happen in The Chosen?
he's sitting. It's that episode
Oh yeah,
where
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
like the
yeah.
flash forward. They're all older. One of the Jameses was martyred, and they were all in town for the grieving ceremony, right? And they were all kind of giving their accounts to John, and he's sitting there, and the episode ends with him, with this monologue, writing it down. And yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, and what I like about this too is like you have to look at this beginning and say, okay, well, like who's the intended audience? And then you look at it as being Jewish people and Greeks. And when you do that, you kind of see describing like when it goes to like, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Great. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing that's like, I'm going to tear my shirt. And then here it is. He was with God in the beginning. And that's when like Jewish people would just tear their shirts in blasphemy, right? I mean, that's what but like it's taking it and saying like this human person that you see, that you can tangibly touch and feel and eventually kill, right?
Yeah.
Like this is he was with
Yeah.
God, in the beginning. And like that is, so that's blasphemy to the Jewish people. And to Greek, they're looking at you like crazy. Like
Yeah.
the logos is this like reason, and it's becoming a human. I don't understand. Like they're like, that's not even it's unthinkable that would, I don't know, so it's like both audiences are, this is enough to kind of spark something in both, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to John, it's like, I'm just giving you the good news of Jesus. Like I don't know. So yeah, that's 1 through 5. I don't know if you have anything else to say on it, but
No, just a cool note just on like just the first line here. It says, in the beginning is an allusion to Genesis 1:1 with the intention of linking Jesus, the Word, with the God of creation. The event of Jesus's incarnation, therefore, had cosmic significance. The Word is Jesus Christ, the eternal, ultimate expression of God. In the Old Testament, God spoke the world into existence. In the Good News, God spoke his final word through the living Word, his Son. The phrase, the Word was God, attributes deity to the Word without defining all of the Godhead as the Word. So that was a little interesting little blurb there. But yeah, just the fact of like putting like trying to wrap your brain around Jesus existed from the beginning, but then came and was like you and I, and then we killed God who's been around from the beginning. Like what? Like it's just, man, it's huge.
yeah, this always struck because it's like this essentially, I feel, is like this juggling with the chicken and the egg thing, right? What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's personally a very easy question. I think the chicken came first. Which would fall in line with this.
Yeah,
So,
because I mean, God.
I mean, I don't want to say Jesus is a chicken. That's not what I'm trying to. But like this analogy, I
Yeah,
guess that's all. But like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, right? It
yeah,
is. I'm just wrestling with that idea. This
yeah, it's
this
hard
this
because like
paradox of.
so like my kids are 5 and about to be 8 in like 2 weeks,
Mhm.
and like they go to church. We're raising them um in our beliefs, obviously. Um, but like trying to trying to explain to them like what the Holy Spirit is and like how that is also the same as Jesus, but also like an entirely separate individual. And then also try to tell them that like Jesus and the Holy Spirit are also God, but God is also like a separate individual. It's like so hard. Like the girls are growing up and they're at that age now to ask these questions, which obviously like are questions that even I still like struggle with comprehending fully. Like, yeah, I know that the three are one, but they're also three, and it's like how how do I explain that first off? Like, how do I get that out of my mind into like a thought that can be comprehended, but then like explain it to an 8-year-old? It's
Yeah,
like ah,
it's crazy too. I feel like that's something I've been trying to actually understand myself, going through some of my textbooks and like taking a church history class, or the story of Christianity is what it's called. And I realized there are so many heresies involving the Trinity of like what it is and like what it actually means. And so now I've read so many heresies that I don't even know what the full I am I am so that gives you confidence if you're listening, that like you're learning from somebody that is stumped
yeah,
on
yeah.
no
And now that
on
they're no
the
longer
Trinity.
listening, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, and so, but I don't know. Dude, I don't even know. I feel like my kid or kids, well, I have one right now, but I can't wait till she starts asking like, well, why is well the school the sky is blue? Well, why? I'm like, well, that's easy. I can explain that. But like you're in it, I don't know how to like
Yeah,
how do you, even if you did fully understand it, how do you explain that to, because it doesn't logically make sense, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's it's almost like there's this logical fallacy that you're just gonna like you can't, which to this it's like the word becoming a human. They're like, well, I don't that's I think that doesn't make like it doesn't make sense. So it's like, how does, I don't know.
yeah. And a non-Christian related subject with explaining things to kids. Like another thing I struggle with is like kids are so great, dude. Like being a parent, it just makes you use different parts of your brain. I'm telling you. Uh, they'll be like, "Daddy, what's this word mean? Like, what's guilty mean?" And I'm like, "How the heck am I supposed to define this word
How
for
do
a
you define a
5-year-old?"
word without using the word, right?
Yeah. Well, it's
Well,
like,
it means
means
you're
that you well, okay, maybe guilty was a bad that's easy. It means you did something wrong, but,
it's
like,
like, when you ate the
yeah, you
candy and you should not have eaten the
yeah,
candy,
but, like, they'll ask,
that
like,
was
"Well,
you.
what's this word mean?" And then, like, in my explanation, I use another word, and I'm like, "I know they're not gonna know what the heck that means." And then they're like, "Well, what's that mean?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So 25 minutes later, nobody knows what we were originally trying to talk about, and we're like, "Hey, you wanna watch Bluey?" Yeah.
Yep.
Anyways, yeah, let's unlet do you have anything else in that
No,
little
no,
thing?
no, we can go on to
Okay.
go through, 6 through 9, I think is a nice little is the next little sectioned out.
Okay. God sent a man, John the Baptist, to tell about the light so that everyone might believe because of his testimony. John himself was not the light, he was simply a witness to tell about the light. The one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. Finn.
So no, yeah, I like this too because we're not really getting into John the Baptist yet, and we don't even really talk about it. It's like this introduction in John that he kind of brings up in, because I was wondering how we haven't really talked about John the Baptist yet, and then we're going into this, and I don't even think we really talk. Yeah, so it's it's interesting to see the literary aspect of this. Like he's talking about this, and then he's like, all right, and there was a man, his name was John, and he came to witness and testify, and like it's interesting to me that this is like what John chose to put here. And although I do like he was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. And I think that's something like there's a lot to take from that. Is John is a messenger, right? He's a messenger in the wilderness, I think is what we, and then you get that, I think in Isaiah, it talks about being a messenger of the wilderness in the wilderness. And so, but John's a messenger, and just as John is a messenger, we being Christians are messengers, right? Like we are not the message. We are not, like we are the messengers that have come to testify about Jesus. Jesus is the message, and so like it's a very distinct thing that I love watching John the Baptist, because he makes it very clear of like, it's like, you want to be a disciple, like look at John, go eat some bugs, and
start plucking some camel hairs.
Yeah, and testify about, I just, I don't know. I mean, I think like in the modern church, it's very flashy. It's very different, different things like that. It's like worried about like the message and spicing up the gospel, and it's got to have the right kick to it. And like, and I like how clear this is. It's just like, hey man, like you don't need to do anything. Just testify about the light.
Yeah.
Light's going to light up a dark room.
Right.
You don't need to do anything else with it. You know? So
yeah, and it's just a side point that we don't need to explore further, because this would turn this into like a 3-hour episode. In the modern church's attempts to spice up the gospels, they really just dumb down the gospel. Whereas if they just preached the gospel, like church would be so spicy.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And it's like, I've been to churches where it's like, it's almost like, I swear, I get to the end and I'm like, I don't think he said the name Jesus, or like anything. And it's like this, like you just said, it's almost like dumbing it down. It's dumbing it down. It's not even, it's probably a more elegant way to say that, but like, it's, you miss so much, because you've lost the message.
Yep. Because you try to make the gospel attractive to people, and in doing that, you remove the entire point of the gospel. And people come, and you essentially just get like Dr. Phil version of church, where you're like, this is how you become a better person. And it's like, if you would just preach the gospel, that would come in living the way that Jesus told us to live. Like,
because
anyways, that's a whole other topic.
No, but it is. It's like, look, man, it is not an attractive thing to say like, hey man, what you should probably do? You should probably go wash your neighbor's feet. Like, it's not like there's, you can try whatever you want, but like, you can't make that sound enticing. Like you can't make that. And I'm kind of making light of that situation there, and like using that as an example, but like you need to, like, that is there's no way to spice that up. That's a clear message that Jesus was trying to convey when he did wash the disciples' feet. And it's like, you need to, you get what I'm trying to say though? Like, it's like,
Mhm.
there's there's no amount of glamour that you can add to that people are going to be like, yeah, I'm excited, like
Yeah.
it's sacrifice. It's a sacrificial thing to serve other. And so I don't know. I just love the way John is presented. And like, I don't know. I'm not gonna go out and eat bugs and but like it's yeah, I don't know. Every gospel presents him in a way that I'm like, man, he's what a great guy.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a real shame that he got his head chopped off, but
yes. But yeah, and it's to testify about the light. And so what does that mean? You point people to Jesus. You
Mhm.
don't point people to what we're like right now, like what we're doing. Like I want my whole goal is to point people to Jesus, right? Like
Mhm.
what I think the intent of like things like The Chosen is to point people to Jesus, right?
Mhm.
Like not to follow The Chosen, not to follow the nerdy Bible, not it's to point people to that. So yeah, I
Yep.
don't know. I just like that messenger. So I don't know. That's all I got to say about that little section of stuff here. But
Right
so
on.
if you want,
So
yeah, 10. Um, yeah, 10 through 13 is the next little snippet.
he came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God.
Hmm. I feel like John really understood Jesus in this. I'm gaining a little bit of an appreciation for John more that I go over this because
My
this is
dude.
like the what 15th time I've read John 1 through 18 in the past. um, yeah, I'm gaining a little bit. He was in the world, and the world was created through him. I feel like he's pointing out I feel like that's a contradiction, right? Or am I wrong here? I don't know.
He
Uh,
was, say what you said again?
he was in the world, and the world was created through him. Almost maybe like his spirit was always dwelling, which we're going to get into the word dwell. But um,
Yeah, I don't know how to explain that.
I don't know. But yeah, the world did not recognize him. They did not, or recognize meaning know or understand or perceive, right?
Mhm.
Um, but he came to his own. His own is Israel and Jewish people, right? That's so he came first to his own people, his own culture, the what they would have described in themselves as like the holy race, right? Like the Jewish people
Mhm.
came to his own. They did not receive him, but there were some. But to all who did receive him, he gave them right to be children of God. That's what I have. Children of God. Is that what you have?
Mhm.
Okay. Children of God. And that children of God is both Gentiles and Jews. So he came to the Jewish, but who received him was the Gentiles and Jews. Um, and so to those who believe in his name, who were born, at that point you're looking at God's family. You're born into, like, you are God's family. So not only are you a Gentile now, you're a child of God, and you're now a part of his holy family, right? So that's a pretty bold
Mhm.
statement. Not of natural descent, referring to the Israel and Jewish, but of the will, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. Almost like you're spiritually alive. That's
Mhm.
what I kind of got from that. So, what do you
Yeah, it takes me back to I feel like we're gonna do a lot of reference to The Chosen, probably because we just watched
Yeah.
a million episodes of it,
Well,
recently.
and most of our audience, I feel like, has,
Yeah.
found us because of that.
But you happen to, maybe recall a scene of John sitting on a certain staircase while Jesus and Nicodemus were having a particular conversation, and kind of, um I know that, like, that was a conversation of Jesus, Jesus actually saying the things that they were alluding to John writing down there, but it's also kind of alluded to here in the beginning, the whole, like, being born again, right?
Mhm.
It just makes me think of Nicodemus's reaction. He's
Nicodemus,
like, what do you mean? Yeah.
how
How
do
are you?
you
What, you just
re-enter your
crawl back
mother's
in there? Like, what do
womb?
you I just
Oh man.
every time I think of being reborn, I'm just like, that's silly Nicodemus.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I think it's a pretty straightforward little section, though. I
yeah.
mean, it's just, God came, or Jesus came
Mhm.
first to the Jewish people, and then the rest.
Mhm.
And I think that falls in line too with what we understand of Jesus. Like as much as we want to be like, oh, he came to the Gentiles, like, of course I feel like that was part of his mission, but like he definitely came to the Jewish people first, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, because that was God's promise to the
Hmm.
to the
Yeah.
Jewish people, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it makes total sense. So the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. I can
Full
keep
of,
going if you want.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, John
Full of grace
testified.
and truth. Did they not say that?
No, it says, full of his glory and the glory of the Father's one and
Oh,
only
okay.
Son. And then that's where it ends.
Huh.
That's verse 14. So verse 15 says, John testified about him when he shouted to the crowds, "This is the one I was talking about when I said, 'Someone is coming after me who is far greater than I am, for he existed long before me.'" And then the last chunk is 16 through 18. So we can go through 14 and 15 if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do that. Just because this is pretty good here. So I actually strongly dislike the way the NLT, what the NLT did there.
Let's hear the
Um,
CSB.
so the word became flesh and dwelt among us. We observed his glory, the glory as the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. So that's 14. And then 15 is fine. But 14, I definitely
That's
did
a
not.
it's a big difference.
It is a big difference. Like I was actually very surprised at that. And so the word became flesh. That's, I think that is that's a very straight. I think actually somewhat straightforward, but it's like completely human. Well, actually, not. It doesn't, because it doesn't make sense. But completely human, completely
Yeah.
divine. Like, you know, archetype of yeah. So
Yeah.
does that
Yeah, I
make
think the
sense?
first sentence is fine because made his home and dwelt among us. They're, same gist. But
Well,
then,
but that's actually where I would actually stop right there.
yeah,
So dwell, yeah. So dwelt. So another word for that is, what did you use? It
made his
was,
home among us.
yeah, made his home. I guess, but dwelt is, so the word goes to tabernacled among us.
That's the note that's in this too.
Is there, okay? So it's tabernacled among us, and tabernacle, of course, is what um you get in not Exodus. I think I'm in the end of Exodus or Numbers. No, what is, I think Levitic. Why am I just read this? So it's either the end of Exodus or Leviticus or Numbers, right? One of them. They line out of what the tabernacle is, and it's after Moses gets the Ten Commandments and all the
Yeah,
laws,
yeah.
right? It's building this tabernacle, and they lay it out. It should be this long and that many things and this many rings of bronze rings and silver, and the altar of incense and this and that. And so it's like it's this place where God can come and dwell. And what's really cool here is tabernacled, and it actually, I came across this First Kings in King Solomon, in First Kings 8:27. I just like this because he kind of references this, and I'm trying to read it real quick. I'm trying to find it. There it is. So it was Solomon he just finished the first temple, right? And he was dedicating it to God. And it was like first was a tabernacle, then was the temple, right? And these are like the dwelling places of God, right? And so he said, but will God indeed live on earth? Even heaven, the highest heaven, cannot contain you, much less this temple I have built. And so it's interesting to see like the idea of dwelt. I don't know. It's just a small reference that I found to this. So it's not anything important, but in case that was enjoyable to you. But no, it just being like Solomon, building this temple for this place where God dwells among, and he's just like, I don't even think this is going to do what we think it's going to do. It's not going to contain you. Like, you're bigger than that. You hovered over the earth. You dwelt on the earth before, you know what I mean? In Genesis, I'm kind of referring to, but this is interesting because it didn't contain him, because God or it's the order of things seems off here. And dwelt, the word becoming flesh is odd, right? I mean, in itself, and then and dwelt among us. And so I don't know. I think dwelt is a pretty interesting word to think. I just got hung up on that word thinking about it. That's why I kind of stopped there.
Yeah, no, the note here says made his home literally means tabernacle. The analogy is that the tabernacle in the wilderness, when God pitched his tent among those of the Hebrews and manifested his glory there, so Jesus identified himself with humanity by becoming human, and we have seen his glory. So yeah, kind of similar to what you just kind of talked about. But the next part is interesting. The NLT says he was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, which is different from, I think, the other part. And we've seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. But they use unfailing love and faithfulness. And what's yours? Use like
full of grace and truth.
Grace and truth.
Grace and truth. And I feel like this is, I'm trying to think about 14 as one big, well, it is one big verse here, but like, I'm trying not to let that period throw me off here. And so like, I'm not like over compartmentalize these two, but he's saying like, okay, the word became flesh, right? He became human. He dwelt among you, and what you're so used to God being like, you're so used to like the veil and trying to build this little home for God to dwell in. Like, you only partially know God that way. Like, you don't actually like, he's not actually dwelling in the way that Jesus is dwelling. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, and well, like, I think the important thing to understand is like in the Old Testament, like, God wasn't available to everyone. Like,
no. Yeah.
like he talked to specific, like, limited number of people, and only a certain group of people got to experience God's presence and, his truth and grace and, what does it say? His unfailing love and faithfulness. And what I love that this is saying is like, God became human, So he became a mobile living tabernacle, right?
Mhm.
And that tabernacle lived among all of us, not just, the royal priest who was allowed in like the inner courts of the temple or whatever, or not just, Moses or Jacob or Abraham or no, he lived among us, like
Yeah, no, that
all
is
of
the
us.
difference right there. So I feel
And
like when he dwelt within,
Mhm.
and now he's like dwelling without, or not without,
Outside.
outside. Yes, but no,
I knew what you were saying. I knew what you were saying.
that there it is. That's the distinct difference for me, and that
Yeah.
it's almost like it's mobile, you
Yeah,
know.
it's not exclusive anymore. It was
Yep.
exclusive before, but now it's not.
Yep.
Um,
Man, that's so, and that's why like that has to be my favorite line so far. Like I love the poetry of the very beginning of John, but like that is so rich into like this 14 verse 14, into like that right there is like, man, I can walk away from that and be like, all right, I'm happy. Like
yeah.
I don't know.
And this is where scripture gets, well, one, lost in translation, but two, lost in context too, because like if you've never read the Old Testament, if you're like a new believer, haven't heard much out of the Old
Mhm.
Testament or read it yourself, like that wouldn't be a big deal, right? Well, of course, like God lives among us, right? Duh. But like no, like that's kind of not how it was. Like he was only available like
Mhm.
to certain people, and then after that, like he was not available at all. For he didn't speak to anyone for like 400 years or whatever the number was, right? Um, so like at this time, people reading this would have been like, "Whoa, wait a second, what are you trying to say here, man?" Like, you know.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah. Anyways, there's a lot more to get into with that whole thing, and like, people who saw the glory of God, like in the Old Testament, like they just like drop over dead. You
Yeah,
know what
we're
I mean?
actually
Like,
I actually we'll touch on that at the very end of this little section
yeah,
here. Yeah, I did make notes of that. That's interesting. But actually let's get there. What are we
yeah. We
six
only got two little
yeah, or,
blurbs left, or no?
yeah,
Yeah,
just
we're back down.
16 through 18, just sum it up.
Yeah. So from His abundance, we have all received one gracious blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the unique one, who is himself God, is near to the Father's heart. He has revealed God to us.
Yeah, there was actually a mixture of what I liked and what I didn't like. I did like how they used the unique one. Mine,
Mhm.
it says the one and only son, which is implicit of that. It explicitly said, I mean, it's implied there, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not explicit, but it's implied that that's the unique one. But I can't help um, but think of the chosen with verse 17. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. I
Yeah.
cannot get the mic drop out
Yeah.
when Jesus
I
walks in
am the
and he's
law of
like,
Moses.
I am the law of Moses. Yeah. No, but it shows, interesting enough, that that is actually pretty theologically correct if you assume John is theologically correct, right? So like I law, like Moses is the giver of the law, right? It was
Mhm.
given through Moses. Well, Jesus is the fulfillment of the law, right? And I think that's a pretty basic understanding. I don't
Yeah, and
probably
fulfillment means
really
what?
say that.
Completed, right?
Complete it. Yeah,
So if it's completed, it still is. It's just done.
it is done.
So him saying I am the law of Moses is not wrong, because if he is the law of Moses fulfilled, that means the law of Moses is completed and done, but it still was the law of Moses.
Mhm.
So therefore, Jesus is the law of Moses. Does that track, or am I just
Yeah, no, I'm trying to come up with
word vomiting?
another analogy. I don't disagree, I guess. So like
Like him saying in the show that he's the law of Moses doesn't mean that like the law of Moses is still the law. It's just that he is the law of Moses
mhm.
completed now, fulfilled.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
overrides the law of Moses.
well, yeah, and so all right, this is the way I kind of envision it. I early on in my walk of faith, I guess you would say, I wrestled with this idea of like um thinking about the Old Testament and the New, because I tried to like, at first I'm like, well, what is this madness going on here? And like, how do you connect it to this like
Yeah.
this this other madness that's going on here? Like, how do you like connect the two, and how does it make sense? And like I think about like humanity as being this like thing, this like for lack of better words, evolution. Not not that
We are
evolution,
triggering
but
everyone in
yeah,
this last
yeah.
5 minutes. We're just making sure we cover all the bases.
So I don't mean that word in in even in the word that the controversial term,
Right.
but like
The ever adapting.
as humanity progressed. There you go. That's the way I would say it. I almost see it as like, you know, these early on, like you guys just won't get it. Like God speaking, and it's very evident that humanity just really didn't understand it. Which is fine, because you see, it's like it becomes more. I don't know. I want to argue it becomes more civil, or potential for civility.
Mhm.
But I mean, I guess I would say when we still have existing people that survived the Holocaust and World War II walking among us. Like I don't know if we fully have walked away from, or I don't think we fully become, arrived at being civil. I don't know if that's an argument to be had, but like I feel like as you kind of go on, like Jesus or God's just kind of throwing a little bit more, and you kind of understand a little bit more, and a little bit
Mhm.
more, and then you look at like the laws of Moses, and your first inclination is to be like, man, that's barbaric. Like some of the things that they did, like like purifying and sacrifice, and like ripping the head off doves, and like I mean seriously, like it
Yeah.
seems so barbaric, and sacrifice itself seems barbaric, right? And it's so much more complex than that, because it's like I feel like by the time Jesus comes along, it's like this further explanation of these laws. Like it it's like how you were talking about, how do you explain to your kid this word,
Mhm.
and you're trying to explain it, and like I envision God like that in that same instance. So it's like, well, like guilty. I don't know how do you describe that in a way of like not using the word, or like what I mean, like
Right. Yeah.
and how does it us being like a 5 and 7 year old kid like try to understand the
Yeah.
complexities of like morality, and like,
Yeah.
and so I don't know. I I feel like the law still existed, but like the meaning of the law still exists,
Yeah.
but like strict adherence doesn't seem to, right? I don't
Yeah.
know.
I don't know.
Like
It's
if
like
we're all
yeah.
blasphemers, if anything, or not blasphemers, but like do we keep like the Sabbath, that strong indicate like of what,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's so
Yeah.
much like, what do we do? I haven't ripped a head off of a dove or went to a priest to do that in, in a
Right,
long,
but that's the
time.
cool thing. That's the fulfillment part, right? Like, because if you
Mhm.
just use the sacrifice portion of the many laws of Moses, right? Okay, so the law of Moses calls for sacrifice. Well, God's like, okay, well, here's the last sacrifice, right? So it's Jesus. Like Jesus is going to be that. That's the last.
But but does it fully negate Moses's laws?
I don't think so because we're still like you probably shouldn't kill people.
No,
You
yeah, no, that's the commandments,
are the
but
commandments
there's still
completely
like
separate from the
400
laws of
or
Moses, or like you know what I mean? Like
Well, yeah, there's the 10 commandments, and then there's like the, what is it, 607 laws.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the true, like, getting really into the weeds of it, I don't know how to answer that
No,
question.
I don't know either. I didn't expect that. No,
Yeah.
I just,
Did
it
you
is
ever
something
expect
that
we'd be talking about the "I am the law of Moses" line from The Chosen in the
yeah.
chronological gospel?
No,
I
but
didn't.
it's
It
right.
wasn't on my bingo card.
It's right here though. I mean, essentially,
Yeah.
it's like, what does it mean? I mean, I think we're addressing a thing that I just really haven't thought. What does it actually mean to fulfill a law?
Yeah.
Like,
It's a good
in
question.
in my logical sense, like, because I throw a baseball in the air and it tracks with the laws of gravity, like, it doesn't, like, I mean, I guess the ball fulfills the law of gravity and, like, fall and adheres to it, but, like, no,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's not fulfilling. But you get what I'm saying? Like, it still exists. It should still exist. I don't know. I've had a
Yeah.
hard time thinking about how how it shaped from a Jewish strong adherence to their culture and traditions to, like, this. I mean, I would say right now, like, we're basically a bunch of pagans. Like, not really, but, like, as compared to how it started,
Yeah.
like, I mean, we our culture's so, like, me. I mean, me now, I'm like, hey man, like, I really want to have this, like, Sabbath this Saturday, and I catch myself working on my phone. Like, I
Yeah.
can't even, like, relax for 5 minutes, let alone 24 hours of a,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure,
I
and, like, I mean, yeah, if we were going by the old laws, yeah, we would all be we'd be making all the Pharisees rip their shirts right now.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna stop using that, by the way. That's, like that's become my new thing,
Yeah.
ripping
I,
shirts, taking names.
I guess, yeah. I would say getting through this whole chronologic, that's something that I still, as a Christian, struggle with, is that idea of, like, adhering to these old traditions. And I get the whole idea. I get it, dude. I get it that Jesus fulfilled it. We don't have, but, like, but at what point, like, is it just, are we just picking and choosing what we don't adhere to? Do we have a
Mhm.
modern sense of, like, of where we don't really have the urgency and we're just kind of like, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, I'll have to this is
It's
making me
something I'm gonna
really
have to
wanna
think
dig
about.
into it now.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think a lot about this one. But
But yeah, I mean, that's, so much for short episodes, eh?
yeah, well,
I think this one's like an hour and
speed,
a half long.
speed it up. Um,
Hey, I'm not putting
but
time
he did.
frame on good conversation, you know?
Just to quickly though, really quick at the end, he said he has revealed him. Jesus reveals true nature of God. This is where you talked about the theophany is what it's called, where the Greek word for God and appear, and, like, where angels would appear to, like, Abraham, Jacob, and Gideon, and, like, or like, they would argue that, like, those might be, like, pre-incarnate um versions of Jesus and stuff. Like, you ever hear theophany or no?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's interesting. But, like, you remember when Abraham, that the guys that come to, like, almost like the messengers, the angels, right? Like, they think it's like pre-incarnated Jesus. I don't know. That's some you get
Oh,
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Jacob, right? When he wrestles with God, there's the man that he wrestles with. They argue that, like, that might be the, I don't know. I don't even want to, that's a whole nother
Uh,
world, but you brought it up
it's
earlier and I made a note.
pre-Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty, yeah, but interesting. Well, um, like you said, um, we really pushed that one. So we made it. Hey, you know what?
You know what? It's all John's fault, really,
Yeah.
because we were doing great, and then we got to John, and we're just like, "Well, now our
Yeah.
minds are blown, and we're just really gotta
But
hash this
that's,
out."
as I was going through it, I was going through these, like, circles of, like, but um I I made this realization during this episode, because it's a Monday night right now. Usually I release episodes on Tuesdays, so I am officially changing to releasing episodes on Wednesday. So, because
Nice.
currently right now it is 11:49 p.m. and
Yep.
I will not be mixing up and recording the introduction of, honestly, I don't think we can download it in time. So
Yeah.
Wednesdays are my official release date of episodes now. So
Yes.
if it's Tuesday, well, at this point you'll have realized, but yeah, no more Tuesdays. I usually release it Tuesday at 1 a.m. is when the episode went live, so that I can populate all the
Yep.
things.
Yep.
But
1
no,
a.m. is a
I'm
good time. We usually do
Wednesday.
Mondays at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys for hanging out for whatever episode number this is. And we'll be back real soon with the next little section of scripture. Really looking forward to it. And yes, thank you for listening.
Yeah. Have a good one.